When a white banker denied a black couple a loan, he had no idea he would not only destroy his career, but also ignite a movement that would change the system. What happened next will shock even the most seasoned observers. But let's start at the beginning. Robert White sat confidently behind his massive oak desk, his fingers tapping away on his laptop. His luxurious office radiated status, leadership, and power. In the adjacent hall, employees were busy serving clients, but Robert only paid attention to those he deemed truly important. When two African Americans walked into the branch, he didn't look up immediately, but when he noticed them, he sighed inwardly. More dreamers. Another waste of time. Elizabeth Carter, dressed in an elegant pantsuit and wearing a confident smile, approached the counter. Her husband, Jonathan, tall and composed, walked beside her, taking in the surroundings. Michael, a young associate standing at the counter, was ready to assist them. But Robert, sensing their purpose, motioned for them to come to his desk. "Good morning. How can I help you?" he asked, studying them coldly, as though calculating their flaws. "We'd like to discuss a significant loan," Elizabeth began, handing over a thick folder of documents. "We're planning to purchase a historic building downtown. It will become an educational center for children from underprivileged families. This project is critical and will support hundreds of families." Robert glanced briefly at the documents without bothering to read them carefully. He closed the folder almost immediately and pushed it to the edge of his desk. "A loan of this size?" he asked with feigned politeness. "I'm sorry, but our policy requires substantial proof of financial capacity. From what I see, this isn't quite your level." Jonathan exhaled slowly, suppressing his frustration. His voice was deep but steady. "All the proof is in those documents. We've been financing similar projects for over a decade. This isn't our first, nor our largest." Leaning back in his chair, Robert crossed his arms. "I understand your desire to help, but the amounts you're talking about require more than just paperwork. We need clients with established reputations at major banks. Are you certain you can meet that standard?" Elizabeth held back a smirk. Her voice was soft, but carried a note of determination. "I'm confident we can. Has it occurred to you that not everyone fits within the confines of your stereotypes?" Robert ignored the sharpness in her tone. He averted his gaze, turning his attention to his laptop as if to signal the conversation was over. "If you like, I can suggest more suitable organizations for your needs," he muttered dismissively over his shoulder. Jonathan leaned forward, frowning, but Elizabeth placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for your time," she said evenly, standing. "If you change your mind, you have our contact information." As the couple headed for the exit, Michael, who had been observing the interaction from a distance, approached Robert. "Excuse me, sir, but I think I've heard their names somewhere. Aren't they the Carters? They—" Robert cut him off with an irritated wave. "Don't even think about bothering me with this. Just another pair of overconfident visitors who overestimate their capabilities." Michael fell silent but couldn't shake the feeling that a mistake had been made. Near the bank's exit, Elizabeth and Jonathan encountered a photographer. He froze, staring at them in amazement. "Mrs. Carter, it's an honor to see you. May I take a picture? Your projects inspire me so much. We're so proud of your contributions to our city." Elizabeth smiled, tilting her head slightly. "Of course, but please, no fuss." She posed for a moment before Jonathan gently nudged her toward the door. As they left, the photographer eagerly uploaded the photo to social. The next day, Robert White arrived at the bank, confident that yesterday's visitors were a thing of the past. However, his morning was soon disrupted by a call from the branch manager. "Robert, what happened yesterday with the Carters?" the manager asked in a stern tone. Robert frowned. "Who are the Carters?" he asked nonchalantly. "Are you serious?" The voice on the other end sounded incredulous. "You turned down the most prominent philanthropist in the state. They've personally funded several schools and hospitals. We're already facing a scandal. Do you even realize what kind of mess you've dragged us into?" A sharp, unpleasant tightness gripped Robert's chest. Before he could respond, his desk phone rang. It was the young associate, Michael, her voice hesitant. "Sir, it seems the situation is going public. A client posted a photo of the Carters with a caption saying they were denied a loan due to bias. We're already getting flooded with comments on social media. What should we do?" Robert waved her off, forcing calm into his voice. "It's just the internet. A few headlines, and it'll blow over." But the flood turned out to be much more than noise. By lunchtime, murmurs spread among the staff. A video discussing the incident had gone viral, and the #JusticeForCarters was trending across social media. Bank employees were bombarded with questions from clients, and some even threatened to close their accounts. By mid-afternoon, the tension reached a boiling point. Reporters gathered at the bank's entrance, firing uncomfortable questions. Michael, scrambling to address the crisis, approached Robert again. "We need to respond. People are demanding an explanation." "An explanation?" Robert snapped, his irritation spilling over. "Explain what? That I did my job? Those people came in unprepared. We don't owe everyone a loan." But Michael's voice was firm. "Sir, maybe it's about how you treated them. They had everything they needed. I saw the documents myself." Robert scowled, but didn't have time to argue. He was summoned to an emergency meeting with senior management, where he would have to explain how such a blunder had occurred. Meanwhile, the Carters were already moving forward with their next steps. That evening, Elizabeth appeared on television, using the incident to highlight a large... The bank's reputation was in freefall. On the morning of the third day, as Robert White arrived at work, he was greeted by a group of activists blocking the entrance. They held signs reading, "No discrimination in finance," and "Justice for the Carters." Forcing his way in through a side entrance, Robert felt the tension permeating the building. Employees avoided eye contact, and the branch's leadership refused to engage with him. Meanwhile, clients were closing their accounts in droves. Online, the situation was escalating rapidly. Elizabeth Carter's interview aired during the primetime evening news. "This isn't about us," she said firmly. "We're speaking for those who can't be heard. The financial system should work for everyone, not just the privileged few." By morning, her words had reached millions. People began sharing their own experiences of bias in banking, and the #JusticeForCarters became the #1 trend across all platforms. In a small office at the bank, Michael nervously sifted through documents. She found copies of the Carters' financial records, which clearly demonstrated their solvency. Remembering Robert's condescending treatment of them, she made a decision. Taking a risk, she reached out to Elizabeth Carter via social media and arranged a meeting. Over coffee at a local cafe, Michael confessed. "I've reviewed your file," she said, handing Elizabeth the documents. "Everything was in perfect order. You weren't denied because of the numbers. It was bias, and it's wrong." Elizabeth gave her a warm smile. "Thank you for your courage. Would you like your name to be included when we go public?" "No," Michael said quickly. "I'd lose my job. But please, make sure the truth gets out." The next day, the documents were leaked to a major news outlet. The article detailed how the bank had ignored the Carters' flawless financial standing and instead allowed prejudice to guide its decisions. Meanwhile, Robert was summoned to an emergency board meeting. He was met with stern, silent faces. The chairman, holding a copy of the morning's headlines, broke the silence. "Do you understand the stakes here? The reputation of the entire bank is on the line." Robert, struggling to maintain composure, attempted to defend himself. "The situation has been blown out of proportion. This was a misunderstanding. I was simply following standard procedures." "A misunderstanding!" the chairman snapped. "You turned away the most prominent philanthropists in the state. Clients are fleeing, and we're losing millions." As those words sank in, Robert realized his time was up. At the same time, the Carters held a press conference. The day after the press conference, where the bank issued a public apology to the Carters, the city was abuzz with conversation. Outside the bank, journalists with cameras replaced the protesters. Headlines blared. "Bank admits mistake, a new era of equality or reputation repair." Robert White, now dismissed by the board of directors, watched it all unfold from his apartment. His office was already empty, his belongings packed into boxes. Frustrated, he scrolled through the news on his phone, seething at the coverage that portrayed him as the sole culprit. "They made me the scapegoat," he muttered, staring at the screen. "They're protecting themselves, and I'm the one paying the price." Yet the gnawing thought that his arrogance and bias had sparked the entire crisis refused to leave him. Rather than acknowledge his mistakes, Robert tried to salvage his image by giving an interview to a popular tabloid. "I was used to preserve the bank's reputation," he claimed during a live broadcast. "This was a systemic failure, but I was made the fall guy. Yes, perhaps I was blunt, but how could anyone have known who they were?" His attempt to shift blame failed miserably. The public saw Robert as a symbol of outdated, discriminatory thinking, and his comments only reinforced their negative perception. The hashtag Justice for Carters evolved into hashtag Systemic Change Now, calling for broader reform in the financial sector. A new beginning. Meanwhile, the Carters focused on building their initiative. Together with the bank, they began developing a financial literacy program and planning the launch of their first educational center. Their foundation garnered attention from other major investors, and within a month, they announced the opening of the first school dedicated to teaching young people essential financial management skills. At the grand opening, Jonathan and Elizabeth stood before an eager crowd. Alongside them were representatives from the bank and leaders of local communities. Elizabeth stepped forward to address the audience. "This moment is the result of a shared struggle," she began. "We weren't seeking revenge, we sought justice. For far too long, the system has been closed to so many. Today, we take the first step toward changing that. This center is more than just a building. It's a chance for those who deserve it, but have always been told no." The audience erupted in applause. Jonathan added, "We're grateful for the support, but this is only the beginning. Real change takes courage and unity. We hope this project inspires everyone to believe in equal opportunities." The crowd roared in agreement. Among the audience was Michael, the young bank employee who had exposed the truth. When Elizabeth saw her, she walked over and shook her hand. "This wouldn't have happened without you," Elizabeth said warmly.